I saw a video recently of a woman about my age who's a mother, and she was on the street in, I think it was Milwaukee or maybe New York. I don't remember. And she was just doing street interviews with people about abortion. And yeah, you saw that one. Yeah. She was just doing street interviews with people, just asking them questions. And she had a microphone, like a handheld mic, and she was talking, and then she would let the other person talk. She wasn't being aggressive. She wasn't being verbally abusive. In no way was she being, I mean, she was confronting people in a way, but gently. And there's this woman that she confronted about abortion. It was like, hey, so what do you think about this, blah, blah, blah. And they're having a back and forth. And all of a sudden, she said something that was just set off this woman. I mean, she brought up a point. She contradicted this woman with facts. And this woman just decks her in the face and assaulted her just for correcting her. So we know, and then subsequently that woman was, arrested, but then let off by a corrupt DA. Even though it's on video, it's just unprompted assault, and that woman just got let off. So shows you it shows us that our society hates correction and chastening. When even a DA won't prosecute somebody under the law, it shows that lawlessness is the result of a lack of chastening. That woman, I think it's probably pretty safe to assume, that woman who assaulted the other lady, I won't call her a lady, she was a woman, the other woman was a lady. She assaulted her rabidly because her ego was so fragile that the mere slightest amount of correction caused her to fly off the handle, which tells me that she was a brat growing up, that she was probably not disciplined. She was not corrected or chastened enough. And this is one of the things that I think as a Christian, it's so incumbent upon us to understand chastening in its proper context and within its proper definition. So I know we already kind of talked about it a little bit last week. I think we talked more about the fainting and enduring aspect of it. But today I'd like to kind of backstep a little bit and talk about what is chastening and what should be the effect of chastening, correct chastening. And it can be both, I'm talking about from a parenting perspective or in this life, or in a spiritual context, what the chastening of the Lord should look, what it looks like, and what its result should be. What do you guys think? What is chastening, first of all?
Chastening is correcting.
Right.
Yeah, especially with your children, you do it with love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's also training.
Training. Yes, absolutely. It is training up in righteousness. Right.
I was going to say, I don't think it's necessary. This is discipline for their future. So it's not necessarily correction for what you did wrong.
Yeah.
But correction for God's purpose for you in this life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just looking at Strong's. We tend to think of it as discipline, but one of the definitions in Strong's is instruction, which aims at increasing virtue.
Yes. That is where I wanted to go, was the virtue aspect of it. Yes.
The other one says the whole training and education of children, which relates to the cultivation of mind and morals, employs for this purpose now commands and admonitions, now reproof and punishment. This also includes the training and care of the body.
Yeah, so we can all, it's broad. Yes, and that is what I kind of wanted to get into, is that chastening is very broad. It's a broad term that encompasses a lot of different aspects: disciplining, training, edification or building virtue within somebody. Can we all relate to that in our walks? Do you need more virtue in your Christian walk? Show of hands. Who needs more virtue in their Christian walk? If you don't raise your hand, then wow, I need to, please tutor me, mentor me. Like, You must have arrived, man. Like, please show me how to do that, where you reach the zenith, man. Because I think all of us need that. Now, here's another question for you. Are you willing to endure the chastening? That's not rhetorical. Are you willing to endure the chastening? How does that make you feel? That's part of the contract. Right. That's in the fine print down at the bottom that you just skip over. Like, I want to get to the good stuff. Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're afraid of failing at the challenge. Yeah. I'm with you there. I hate enduring it. I hate it. Oh, well, I'm not talking about necessarily getting into an argument with somebody. I'm talking about chastening from the Lord. Oh, when the Lord chastens you. But I get aggravated even from that. I'll admit it. Sometimes I feel like I'm being punished unfairly. Yeah.
So, and one thing, I'll throw a little twist on this. It's not always just events either. It
Mm-hmm.
could be lifetime. Paul's a good example because he had some infirmity. We think it's his eyesight. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
But Jesus wouldn't take it away because maybe his pride, who knows what the reason was, but he kept that in place so that Paul would stay true to his calling.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can look at these things and go, oh my gosh, I got this burden to carry. That may help save your soul because it encourages you to do the things that you need to do because now you're dependent on God instead of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you know it's from the Lord?
Well, that's a great question, actually. Hindsight is probably a big part of it. Whenever you're going through it, sometimes it's hard to know. But in hindsight, you can see the fruit that came from that. And anything good, it says in the Bible that God is the Father of lights from which all good things come. So if you undergo some type of trial or tribulation and then there's good fruit that comes from that, then I would say that's probably pretty likely came from God. Now, yeah, he turned it to good, right. Also, I think sometimes we're chastened, we're corrected by other people. They speak from the Bible, or they say something that's like, I've felt it during a sermon before, during Jerry's sermons before sometimes, where it's like, I'm like, wow, that cuts deep. That really hits me in my heart of hearts because I needed to hear that in that moment. So it comes from God's word. God can chasten from his own word, or from other people delivering God's word to you. Conviction, yeah. Playing on conviction. But not everything, you're right, not everything that's bad that happens to us is necessarily part of God's will, in the sense that he wants it to happen to you. But sometimes he allows things to happen to us, even and knowing that he'll be there beside us to go through it. Like God doesn't strike down innocent people willy-nilly. But what he does do is he allows bad things to happen to those people sometimes because he knows that the rich blessings that are going to come from that affliction are worth enduring. So it's kind of, I think of it like whenever if I'm in the gym and say I had a trainer or a coach and I'm like, yeah, this weight, I can do this weight. Yeah, this feels good. And he's like, he's counting my reps, and he's like, you're all the way up to 10, and you're barely breaking a sweat. You're not doing progressive overload, dude. He puts on another plate on either side, and then I'm like, it's like, but he knows that he's going to be there spotting me the whole way and helping, making sure that doesn't crush me, but it still hurts. And I think that's how we should think of God sometimes. Sometimes he allows those challenges or those burdens to come upon us, just like what Dennis just said with Paul, with his affliction, his thorn in his side. But also, I think sometimes the chastening comes from the result of our own behaviors or actions. And I've experienced this too, where I was on a wrong path and God struck swiftly and reprimanded me. in a way that course corrected me and put me on a new trajectory. So sometimes that happens too. Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot more people than just us learn from it also.
Yeah.
And one major way would be that after we go through this and learn it, we can share with other people. But
Yeah.
a lot of the times, just seeing people, I see some people that just hurt so bad.
Right.
And I hurt so much for them. And then they're so close to God. Just
Yeah.
so close so you can see where they got that. And
Yeah.
the pain I've gone through that felt that. And I hope other people felt my walk with God. And I hope other people can see that and learn from it like I did.
I heard this really cool story from like these couple of monks that, I don't know if the story's true or not, but about these two monks, and one of them, they were like the desert, what they called the desert fathers. They were out ascetics living in the wilderness or whatever, and one of them really, really struggled with lust. And it's like, even though he's alone and away from everybody, he just felt like he was constantly being assaulted with, that desire to abandon his faith and just go back into the city and, find prostitutes or whatever. I don't know how it manifested. And so he goes to this other monk who's older and wiser, and he says, please pray for me that God would remove this temptation from my life. I'm constantly having to pray to God for forgiveness about it, about my thoughts, about my heart and everything. So the guy says, well, yeah, I will. I'll pray for you. And so he prays for him and everything. And the guy goes back to his shack, I guess, or whatever. And he's like, and for days and days, it's been relieved from him. He doesn't have to endure it anymore. And he goes back to the monk and he goes, I've never felt more separate from God. Please put it back on me. Because it was him constantly having to rely on God's grace to get him through those moments of temptation. Ironically, he felt closer to God, like God was right there with him during those times. Now, I don't know if that's a true story. Maybe it's just a parable that has been distributed or whatever, a fable, if you will. But the concept, I think, is maybe sound. Because how often do we want our temptations, our trials, our burdens to be lifted off of us like that? But maybe it's the actual journey through those temptations and trials that will yield a better fruit than if we were just relieved of our struggles, Oh, Doug? Did you have any? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's an interesting one. If you just think of the power of God and His sovereignty and what we believe about God, everything is from God. He
Yeah.
either directs it or He allows it.
Yeah, indirectly or directly, it's from God.
So
Yeah.
if we change the question from is this from God
Yeah.
to what is God trying to teach me with this, then I think and that's the humility that we're admonished to do in Scripture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's always something to learn from whatever we're experiencing, regardless of how God delivered it to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to bring this up. Job is a good example.
I was just about to go to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No.
So Job is a good example of someone who got disciplined. We can use that in air quotes. It wasn't for him. It was for us.
Yeah.
And it was a demonstration for everybody else. So his suffering yielded centuries, if not millennia, of instruction to God's people.
Yep.
For what he went through. And he didn't go through it for himself.
Right. So that's where actually I wanted to turn to. Well, first I was going to read from verse 7. If ye endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is he that the Father chastens not? And then if we go over to Job 1, and this is after Satan has approached the throne room of God. Hey, yada yada. The challenge is issued, and God accepts the challenge. He says, "Go afflict Job." So Satan kills all his sons and killed all his property, all that stuff. So he's already been smitten. And a great wind smote the four corners of the house and fell upon the young men. They are dead. Yada, yada. And then Job arose, verse 20, in chapter 1. Then Job arose and tore his mantle, shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground, and what? Worshipped. And said, naked, and I'm sure he said this with choking sobs and tears streaming down his face. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then verse 22, in all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. He recognized, like you just said, it came from God. Whether directly or indirectly, it came from God. And he still chose to bless the name of the Lord and worship him. And then later on, in chapter 2, after Satan is like flummoxed, and it's like, well, of course, I just took away all his material blessings. If I actually afflict Job, then he'll, curse you. And God's like, fine, go ahead. You can afflict Job, but don't take his life. And so he afflicts him with boils. From head, it says from the head, it says, smote, and Satan smote Job with sore boils. So these are like weeping sores. From the sole of his foot onto the crown of his head. So every surface was covered in it. I just can't even imagine the suffering. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself, so they must have itched like crazy. And he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, wilt thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? And all this did not Job sin with his lips. So again, he still is choosing. He still, in that moment, is choosing to take what comes upon him from God and not curse God. And, obviously we all know the end of that story, but I think we focus maybe too much on God restoring all the material blessings. I think you pointed to it, Dennis, the real gift was that Job retained his integrity. He retained his integrity. And you can go and read in the preceding chapters when Job's laments. I mean, they are deep. They are sincere. They are real. Mourning and questioning God and coming before God and being like, what have I done? And, I'm innocent, yet you still afflicted me. I mean, he was going through it. It's not like he was like some stoic philosopher king, like Marcus Aurelius, stoicism, where he's just like, oh, whatever happens, happens, and I'm just going to remain unmoved by it. No, he was moved by it. It was a human reaction to this chastening. But he still chose to bless God and worship him. And that, I don't know about you, but for me, I read Job, I read these verses, and I feel, more than anything else, I feel convicted about how many times I've been like Peter, where I was being sifted, and I failed in that sifting. I did not rise to the challenge like Job. And I was not as patient with affliction as I should have been. But what has helped, though, is remembering that the Lord loves those he chastens. And if ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father doesn't chasten? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then ye are what? Bastards, and not sons. And I think of that as like, that's actually faith affirming. That's actually faith affirming because the chastisement I have gone through in my life is mild in comparison to Job or Peter or Paul. It's still, I got through it. I repented. I turned back. Or at least maybe not in the moment, but maybe a few days after of whatever happened, I was like, oh, I could have handled that better. Lord, forgive me. I'm sorry I didn't pass that test as well as I could have. Or in the times that I did get through a test and I didn't, fail the test, if you will, I can be like, wow, I would never have been able to do that even just last year. So thank you, Lord. Like, you got me through it. So I think it's there, the chastisement is there to, like Dad said, to foster humility, to really churn us up inside so that way we can be refined. Yeah, Armin.
The thing that keeps going through my mind is in context we're talking about, the writer's telling us to fix our eyes on Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on and he talks about, look what he did for us. So part of the process isn't just that it happens and we try to survive it or persist or persevere, but also how do we do that?
Yeah.
What's the application?
Mm-hmm.
My mind goes to spiritual disciplines. But how are we training ourselves? That issue of correction isn't just the correction in the moment, but how do we prepare ourselves to be deeper, better, stronger followers? Whether it's prayer, fasting, service, you name it. Those spiritual disciplines are the things that prepare us for anything and allow us to grow and mature and become more like Christ.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? So just like how, as a parent now, and I'm not going to tell the same story over and over again about Fletcher whenever he was little, but the chastening aspect or the correction that we give our children is for their benefit. It's not us taking out our bile on our children. That's not correction. That's not chastisement in the biblical sense. That's abuse. But what is biblical chastisement is us, for their benefit, giving them either a physical or emotional or some kind of chastisement that is going to result in them. It's a smaller consequence than what the consequence would be later in their life. A spanking for Fletcher whenever he was little was a course correction from an attitude that if I had let it just continue may result in a police officer throwing him on the ground later in his life, right? And throwing him in jail. So there's a smaller consequence early to avoid the larger consequence later. And the same way, I think that's how God, in his sovereignty and the way he sees our lives, the strength of our lives, the frailty of our lives, he looks down and he says, I'm going to give them this chastisement so that way later in his spiritual life, he will be able to endure that bigger challenge. Or, if you think about, flip it from the other side, from a blessing perspective, not just from avoiding harm, from a blessing perspective, I'm going to build these fruits in him so that he can enjoy me more fully for eternity. Because he's trying to instill a Christ-like nature in us. And like Armin pointed out, we are called to be Christ-like. And I was on the mower this week, and I was kind of in a meditative state, or I don't know, just kind of zoning out a little bit. But I really started just imagining in as much detail as possible Christ's crucifixion and the process, the beatings, the revilings, the scourgings, the thorn of crowns, the walking and stumbling underneath the cross, and then the feel of everything as that cross was, where he was nailed to that cross, and then, scraping against it and everything. And I just got overwhelmed with just how could he endure all that and not revile those, not hate those who are doing it to him. I would hate them. I would hate them so much. And I just can't imagine that. And it made me reflect upon my own walk. I was like, man, I've got such a long way to go. I've got such a long way to go. Yeah.
I think too, you often look at it, the perspective of the person doing the chastising and how they're supposed to do it and when it's an act of love versus abuse. If you think about it, the perspective Scripture gives us on the person being chastised, talks a little bit about Job. It's God training us to acknowledge authority with humility.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're called to do with him. That you just described what Jesus did. He submitted to the will of his Father.
Yeah.
Authority in that moment for our benefit. That's why he was able to endure it. You just asked that question.
Yeah.
How was he able to do that? Because he had submitted himself to authority. And when you look at society today, I think that's one of the main things we see is adults who never learned or were trained to
No.
not submit to any
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah.
Right?
Their authority unto themselves.
Unto themselves,
Yeah.
that's their only authority. And as Christians, God's training us to acknowledge and submit to his authority.
Yeah.
Be still and know that I'm God.
That's right. He gives parents as a model for that.
Yeah.
That's what Christians' parents should be, as a model for that authority.
Right.
Right? How was God chastised? Well, that's how parents are supposed to
Yeah.
chastise.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the great tragedies of living in a post-Enlightenment Western context is we've lost that reverence for authority. Because you can still disagree with earthly authorities. There's this concept of lex rex. The law is king. And it's a very strong in the Protestant tradition, and even in Catholic thought too, in some contexts. But it's the idea of, it can be summed up in the phrase, not so, Lord, in the context of like an earthly Lord or king, that you can still pay reverence to people even whenever you disagree with them. And you can point them to a higher authority. That's that concept. But you're right, Dad, what we've done, what we've done in our societies, we've propagated the lie that we are the masters of our fate. We're the captains of our souls, right? That's what is widely disseminated. Well, if that's true, we just have a polytheistic system where every single person is a god, right?
Well, so this in the context of discipleship or evangelism.
Yeah.
We have to understand. So the abandonment of authority starts with moral relativism, which is the abandonment of truth. And if
Right.
there is no truth, there is no truth giver.
Yeah.
And so we often have to start with people there, which isn't even necessarily going to Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually having the rhetorical capability of helping them understand there is absolute truth, there is a truth giver,
Yeah.
and I'd like to share with you about that truth giver.
Yeah.
And that's a hurdle many will not be willing to get over.
That's
And we think we can just start with Scripture,
No.
but they're not acknowledging that truth or that authority.
yeah. Very frequently they don't, unless they have some background in it. The fair this year, that came up a lot this year. That came up a lot this year with my conversations, and maybe it was just because.
What was the age of the people that came up with it most?
Say what?
The age of the people that came up with most? Like
Whenever baby boomer or younger. I mean, usually like baby boomer, Gen X, maybe. It was actually the younger people that were actually more inclined to actually, ironically, listen to, like, hey, these are some reasons to believe in God. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, that's a good point. Whereas it was actually the hippie generation where they're like, I don't believe, I believe in Buddha and blah, 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 and all this stuff, and reincarnation, and they have these really weird ideas. And then I would be like, well, do you think child pornography is wrong? Well, yeah, absolutely. Oh, so you do believe in absolutes. And they're like, oh. Like they never put those things together in their head, And so it's like, so I'd have some good dialogues with them about, but yeah, I couldn't even begin to talk about Scripture yet because they weren't even ready to start talking about authority. They thought that they had it all figured out. They were the authority in their lives. And that was one of the hardest. I think that is why God, He is so patient, and He's so patient with us because He's constantly striving against our own pride. He's constantly trying to eliminate our own pride out of the equation. And it's so hard because we want to cling to it. Yeah.
One thing that's helped me through the years, and I've stumbled like you were describing. I think about if you go through something, it's a dress rehearsal for something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
David met a lion and a bear, and then that was all preparation for meeting Goliath, and God is preparing all of us for some events, right? So they may have nothing to do with us, but they're events that we're working towards, because I think He's sovereign over everything.
Yes.
And so as we're going through them, if we think about it that way, that it's either a future event that we're dress rehearsing for, or somebody else is, right? But that event is helping spread the kingdom.
Yeah. And I love the dress rehearsal concept, because what is the final act? What is the final act of our play that we all have to encounter? Yeah, death, judgment. Death. We all have to approach that final curtain that comes down. And how we approach it, in large part, is going to be determined by how we reacted to all those moments before. And on Sophie's side of the family, we've had a few deaths, and some other people that we know. We've gone to a few, like her friends of her family and stuff. We've had a lot of funerals lately. And I can tell you, there's never been a time where I'm more thankful to be a Christian is whenever I'm at a Christian funeral versus whenever I'm at a heathen's. Because it's a night and day difference. The joy, the love, the celebration of life, the excitement, even tinges of excitement about, I can't wait to see that person again. He endured so many afflictions through his life, and he overcame them, and now he is with the Father, with Jesus. Versus with the heathen, it's all about, oh, she did this play once, and she did this, and she did that, and this, she liked this, blah 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 blah, and then it just kind of ends, and then it's just like, and then she got sick and she died. How depressing! What a life wasted! What an utter failure of a life in comparison. And it really sobered me lately, going to all these funerals and seeing that contrast and such clear delineation between the two, that I'm like, I've never been more grateful that I'm a Christian, because death could come for me tomorrow. And I would hope that people would say the same things, or at least similar things. Maybe not to the same extent as some of these great people like Marlon Henley, but at least to some extent, people would have the same things to say about me in my life. And not just for my sake, but for God's sake, for the Lord, Anyways, that was kind of a side thought, but wow, we're getting close to the end. I'll just continue on, try to finish this section so we can stop talking about chastening. For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. And I wish I could dive into that, but we're running out of time. That we get to be partakers of his holiness, but we only get to do that through the flames. We only get to do that through the challenges of life and the chastening. Now, no chastening for the present seems to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterwards it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. And we all get that concept. You know, I think there's this goofy guy, I think he's an Asian guy, and his videos have been going viral. He does this goofy dance, and he says, do you want to suffer what does he say? It's like suffer the pain of regret or the pain of what does he say? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Oh man, Nathan sent it to me and I was cracking up. But basically, I can't remember the phrase he uses, but you have a choice between two different sufferings. Either the pain of regret or the pain of progress, essentially, like of enduring affliction, so that way you get to the other side of it. The pain of discipline. That's what he says. Is that the pain of regret or the pain of discipline? And that's, you got to choose, because either way you're going to suffer. But one is going to suffer for something good, or one is just going to lead to a downward spiral. Yeah.
I would equate partakers of his holiness in verse 10 with Romans chapter 6, the first few verses where it says, we partake in the likeness of his death.
Yeah.
We partake in the likeness of his resurrection. If we take a little broader perspective on what Jesus' death was, we think of the cross.
Yeah.
His death started the first day of his ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The process of him dying started 3 years before he died.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think about that portion of his life as the process of his death, when we look at that, we want to be in the likeness of that, to be in the likeness of his resurrection. It gets a little bit different perspective.
That is a great perspective. I like that a lot. Yes. Yes.
Isn't that what like kingdom living is?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he says it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. That's the fruit. It's righteousness. At the end of it, it's righteousness. And right standing before God. Right standing before God. And I think that's, again, like I said, when that curtain falls on our final act, and we stand before God on Judgment Day, is he going to say, well done, my good and faithful servant? Or is he going to say, depart from me, I never knew you? And at the end of the day, that should be something we all take very seriously in our lives. All right, and then next week we'll start in verse 12, which is an encouragement to lift up the hands which hang down, the feeble knees, and there's some illustrations there. And then he goes into exhortations concerning our conduct and Esau's failure and contrasting along some good stuff. All right, thank you for your attention. Need the speaker.